Good evening, everyone. And I have a very exciting guest here today on Matriarchal Voices at the Matriarchy Times. She's Esmee, and she is the founder of Medusa Rising, which is an organization which she will tell us all about. Plus, she has a doctorate in literature and feminist philosophy, and she's also the former contributing editor of The Radical Notion, which is a publication which I recommend everyone check out because I went through a little bit of it and it was a really good read. And I think that it will bring a lot of value to anyone who can take the time to go through it. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Esme. Hi, Esme.
Hi. Hi, Farah. How are you this evening? Are you feeling good?
Yep, I am. And I hope that you are having a good day as well.
I am. It's a beautiful afternoon. My dog is asleep on the floor. Everything is great. Yeah.
I have two dogs asleep next to me and they are barking, and hopefully it won't disturb us too much.
Yes. I have warned people before on little recordings that I've made that if you hear my dog bark, we're just going to work through it because that's what he does. So we have a few recordings where Trouble is making his presence known. So yeah. Yeah.
You named him Trouble?
Yes. When we adopted him from a shelter. And we did not know at the time that he had almost no training at all. So, and he was almost a year old, I think.
Okay.
So when we brought him home, he didn't understand any commands. He didn't have a real schedule to his behavior. And all he really knew how to do to talk to us was sort of knock things over or steal something, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot. So he was a lot of trouble.
Okay, so amid all this confusion and trouble, you founded Medusa Rising. So would you like to tell us how you found, like, what brought you to start your organization and what its mission is?
Yeah. So for about 4 years, Jane Clare Jones and I and a whole team of women worked on creating the radical notion. And one of the reasons for the radical notion was that in the UK, famously now, a gender critical movement had arisen in response to what are perceived as some oversteps of trans rights activism. And Jane noticed she has a degree in political philosophy and then also in feminist philosophy. And she noticed that these new women coming into activism really didn't have any grounding in feminist principles. And feminist principles ask for a slightly more nuanced response to trans identification other than just no, stay out. Like there has to be some cultural relationship. So she started the magazine, and also COVID was happening. And I had quit a previous project, so I had time. So we created this magazine together with a group of women in order to lay out the foundations of radical materialist feminism, which Jane understands as an updated version of sort of second wave radical feminism. But very much influenced by some postmodern philosophy, specifically of Luce Irigaray and Jacques Derrida, focusing on difference as a enlivening force in the world rather than a source of difficulty, right? Or something to be put away. And when the project was finished, when we published our 12th issue and kind of got through most of the big chunks of laying out radical materialist feminism and publishing a lot of other women along the way, I decided that needed to continue. The Radical Notion was published primarily as a print journal because of our commitment to a materialist reality, This is part of the combination between radical feminism and materialist feminism that we practice. So we wanted an object. We wanted something tactile and embodied and grounded. But that doesn't travel, right, as fast as all of this fabulous electronic connection does. So I wanted to create a project that would let us break down those arguments into even smaller pieces and set them out into the world and get people sharing them, right? So that's what I'm in the process of doing. But also inviting women's voices into that space and publishing poets and fiction writers and reviews and whatever else people want to send us. At the same time that I set out on my own there, what I realized is that there are a whole bunch of feminist organizations or individual writers who are uplifting again this idea of matriarchy. And all of that research, the research that's grounded in, all comes out of the second wave, all comes out of some of the historians and archaeologists there, and aligns with my long held view, like all the way back to working on my doctorate or my master's degree, that critique is fantastic, right? Smash the patriarchy, you know? But what are you going to build? What are you going to build afterwards? What are you going to imagine? Once you get done smashing, what are we going to do next, right? How do men and women come back to living together after whatever is going to, make room for this new way of being in the world? So I've always been interested in a positive project for feminism. And we've been stuck for generations in just pushing back against the things that harm us, right? But the vision of building matriarchy, in the way that your organization thinks of it, the way that most women are thinking of it, is about creating a world that not only centers women and matriarchal values, but that is a world that creates way less trauma, way less harm than the patriarchy does. Because it is an inherently violent system, right? It has to use violence to maintain itself. So I wanted to help encourage connections among those organizations, but also, I think, very ambitiously, encourage more women who are working on the harm men do in trafficking, pornography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Just daily male violence, to turn back to building coalition amongst each other. Because in some of the first rounds of attempts at global sisterhood, a lot of women from my corner of the globe made a lot of presumptions and a lot of mistakes in relating to women from other parts of the planet. And I would like us to find a way to try again without making those mistakes, because many women live in countries that already have very patriarchal and authoritarian regimes. And in the countries that don't have those yet, like mine, they are coming. They are rising. They are trying to take power back in France, in England. They've already come in the US. They're working on Germany and other countries. Like, not just because that's now happening to us, but because the closure they're trying to create would cement a patriarchal kind of autocracy all over the world. It would leave almost no place from which to begin to take that apart. So I see building those coalitions and trying to increase each other's power as essential. And women's humanitarian organizations globally are surviving, or were surviving before so much funding has been cut by my government. We're surviving on 1% of the total humanitarian funding on the planet, right? And yet, a woman is killed somewhere on Earth every 10 minutes by the men in her society. But we're back. One
I'm
woman
sorry.
murdered every 10 minutes is 5 million women every year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's just the murders, which are the most extreme crimes, right? That's just not the total of forms of assault, right? Or underfeeding women, or just sort of daily violence. That number is in the hundreds of millions, right? And it's intolerable. And we all live in societies that claim to honor women in one way or another, but they don't do it in practice. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the far right political coalitions that are rising globally now are once again, as always, bent on moving women back from the progress that we have made and putting us back in our place. I think we need to, by we, I mean women and feminist organizations everywhere at every level, need to find some ways to cooperate and increase each other's power and ability soon. Not just because of the politics, but also because, Gaia's angry now with the mistakes that we have made in our relationship with her. And she likes life, she likes life and death and regeneration and process, but she doesn't really care whether it's us or dinosaurs, or whether it's us or, some interesting
Okay.
civilization created by insects. So we're going to have to take care of each other. Yeah.
So I just want to know, how far are you in your journey? Like, what have you been doing these days with Medusa Rising?
Well, we're really at the beginning. We just got this little organization together and started in like January. So 7 months.
Mhm.
And and the women who joined in with me here,
Okay.
Victoria Guggenheim and Zara, she doesn't use her real name, Erin and Aja Lyons, are all kind of embroiled in doing a lot of their own work right now. 2 of them are working on doctoral degrees. One is writing a thesis. And Victoria is also establishing a women's arts organization. So we're going slowly so that everybody has time to come around and bring their energy back in. So most of Medusa Rising at this exact moment
Okay.
is me and Victoria. And we will be increasing as we go, but I'm hoping to just even start by building this up to a place where we can definitely guarantee paying the women that we publish for their work, for their art, for their writing, for their music, even video eventually, for their reporting. I'm really interested in showing what is happening around the world to women in the United States and the weird countries in the North. And eventually make a little bit of money for the women doing the work so that there's just a little bit more. My grandpa used to call it walking around money, right? Like, cash to buy yourself something nice every once in a while, pay for lunch. So we'll see if we get that far. But the connections are more important, I think, than anything else.
So while you are on a mission of radical materialist feminism, Matriarchy Times, as you know, is more on a radical matriarchal feminism journey.
Mm-hmm.
So we are of the belief that we need a matriarchy where women will be the center of leadership and decision making. And we don't mean this in a way of equality in a patriarchal structure. We need the
Mm-hmm.
whole society to change, and we need women to be in charge of doing it. Because, as you know and agree, our common enemy, the patriarchy, is the cause of all corruption and of the concept of domination and
Yeah.
basically of asserting control. So
Yes.
our fight is for women's absolute autonomy. We want women to be able to make decisions and to be in charge. And we do this, like you said, a global sisterhood is needed. Women need to help each other out, and we need to protect our women only spaces because, like, patriarchy comes in with their talks of equality and say, like, why can't we come in? And then there are the feminists who say that, okay, you can join too, you can be a feminist. And but that doesn't work in the long term when we're trying to achieve what we really want to achieve. So hopefully we can finally reach together a future of care, cooperation, and a healthy planet on top of everything else, because we will also care more about the environment than the current patriarchy. So
Absolutely.
while
Gosh,
we
these
can both
extractive.
agree
Sorry.
totally that patriarchy is completely unnatural,
Hmm.
um, I'd like you to tell me from your point of view why it is so crucial to dismantle this myth of the forever patriarchy. And
Yeah.
also, please explain what is the myth of the forever patriarchy and how we can dismantle it and why we should.
Oh, sure. Um, the myth of it's a phrase I started using in a couple of essays I wrote for the Radical Notion that sort of synthesized and summarized the work of Maria Gimbutas, the archaeologist, and how the story that she came to understand about our long history had been suppressed, and what it was she was trying to say, and what has corroborated her theories and her methodology since then. And patriarchy started making itself forever from the very beginning, right? It replaced the generative goddess
Mm.
with a father god and said, this is how the world was made, right? This or that god spoke the world into existence. Um, and that just doesn't, obviously makes no sense. That's just not how anything comes to be in biological life. Even single-celled organisms and that reproduce asexually don't speak themselves into existence. Um, and it's a cult belief. It's a pure ideology, right? Human beings who have been civilized have always been patriarchal, or human beings have always been patriarchal because only men are intelligent or inventive enough to create new things or come up with new technology or change the way that they live in the world, you know? It's self-reinforcing in that way that a cult belief is. And because that system completely, whether it's symbolic and cultural or materialist and economic, it's fragile and insecure because it's based on the violent extraction and accrual of riches and power, which is why you see, since patriarchies have been created, periodically it collapses, right? It gets top heavy and collapses in on itself somehow, or the environment changes. The climate often changes is part of the problem. And because the system is so based in control and domination and violence, it's also rigid. And if it's rigid, it can't change in response to its circumstances. What we see, that, which is another sign that it's unnatural, right? It has to keep reinforcing itself at the state level, at the home level, right? Um,
Yeah.
through the sort of, I call it the background noise, right? Or the background radiation of men's violence. It's everywhere in our lives, even if it's not affecting us personally or not affecting us just right this minute, right? And what we find in the archaeological records is that matriarchal settlements and civilizations could exist in place and could exist with great continuity for a really long time. A city like Çatalhöyük, which is in Turkey, a lot of people know of it. This was very important in Maria Gimbutas's research. They discovered that Çatalhöyük existed pretty well in the same place as a combination of hunter-gathering and farming and animal domestication in one spot, pretty clearly aligned with a creatrix goddess and a matriarchal culture in the same place for 3,000 years. Right? And all of that time, as far as anybody has been able to find, they farmed, they hunted, they created pottery, they made jewelry, they built homes, they buried their dead. They did all of these things in a way that kept their society fairly egalitarian. It seems both in terms of sex and class. And the reason that works, the only reason that works, is that the people in that system agreed to continue that system. They liked it, right? Patriarchy only continues because people are forced to comply, right? You be the right kind of woman or we burn you as a witch. You be the right kind of man or we destroy you economically or enslave you, right? So that, I think that's part of the reason that the myth has to die, is that it's pure ideology. The other reason is that it's keeping us away from our history, right? Women are universally colonized by this idea, right? Lifted up out of our history, whatever our traditions used to be, right? In exactly the same way you destroy any culture. You come in, you take the language, you kill the men, you kill the elders, you destroy the memory, right? And you uproot people in order to then make them easier to control, right? That happened to women each time the patriarchy arose anywhere. We need our history to go forward.
Also, just thinking about what you said, just think about history that is taught in schools, history that is celebrated, history that is widely known. Like, even if we don't live in Rome, even if we haven't grown up in Europe, we still know about Julius Caesar. So it's like we know all about this history and we know everything about patriarchal heroes,
right?
For want of a better word. And it's also a tactic they're using. Is that accurate? Is this also a tactic that they are using to make sure that matriarchies don't come up, just to erase it from history and not remind people that it existed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maria Gimbutas, just her, don't even think about the rest of this sort of matriarchal movement in the 1970s and 80s, okay? Just her. As an archaeologist, excavated 30,000 sites in Europe. Right? Across a huge region of Eastern and Central Europe. And
we never heard of.
Yeah, you never heard of her, right? That's because, she wrote 4 massive books full of the evidence that she found. There's an institute dedicated to her work and to continuing it at a university in California. But the reason you've never heard of her is that her partner, Colin Renfrew, who became Lord Colin Renfrew for his cultural contributions, decided that there's just no way that you could find, I don't know, I'm sorry, I got my numbers wrong. She excavated 3,000 sites. What they found were something on the order of 30,000 different goddess figurines, right? Some of them bird-like, some of them snake goddesses, some of them the big, heavy, sort of pregnant figures that we are used to seeing. Some of them are very skinny. Some of them are death goddesses. Some So some of them are related to frogs or deer. And the frog ones look very vulval in their shape. Like somehow the frog and its, I guess the shape of the animal itself and its general wetness must have been related to the vulva and to coming back into life every spring, right? All of these goddesses seem to be cyclical goddesses. The cultures, I mean, this takes a long time to say, but anyway, the cultures that they belonged to were human. We were complicated creatures all the way through. I'm sure we did violence to each other, but those cultures were not structured by violence. They were not maintained by violence. They did not build defensive walls around their settlements. They built corrals for their animals, but not defensive walls. Colin Renfrew decided that there's just no way that you have all of these thousands of little figurines. Most of them fit in the palm of your hand, or you can hold them, right? There's just no way all of those are the goddess. Like, how could that be a scientific or factual thesis? Like, why would there be so many everywhere? Clearly, they were just toys or something, right? He made sure that none of Maria's work was published in the major anthropological journals until after her death. He made sure that her ideas were suspect. She was radically canceled by her own specialty and continued her work anyway. It was such a powerful cancellation, such a powerful erasure that he maintained, that women historians, feminist women historians even, warned in their own histories to be careful of Maria's ideas because they weren't corroborated. They were too, they were sort of too interdisciplinary. She used mythology, she used ethnography, she used linguistics to work out her conclusions. And in the 1970s and 80s, that kind of interdisciplinary work was suspect. It was new and it scared people. Excuse me. So even Gerda Lerner, in her book, The Creation of Patriarchy, which a lot of people are familiar with, says, be careful about Maria's ideas. They don't seem to be based in enough evidence. So the model of patriarchy we have is the one that they built in Sumer, where they built cities and pyramids with god kings on top. And with that, almost instantaneously came ideas about empire and conquering people and taking resources and enslavement and the demotion of those goddesses, Tiamat and Inanna. Both, right? All of that is put to the side because if you know that there are cultures that are older than patriarchy, if you know that there are complex cultures that lasted longer than most patriarchal cultures have, that's a real threat. That's too much encouragement, right? That's too much encouragement for women. We can't have the women encouraged because that's hard for us. That makes us feel small, right? Exactly. No, right? Gosh, guys, I'm sorry, but the Y chromosome is smaller than the X chromosome for a fucking reason. Humans have been humans for a really long time, and their lives have been focused on keeping each other alive and keeping their societies going. So the idea that there are like surplus people, right? Or people who should not be cared for in some way would make no sense in that world whatsoever, right? So yeah, it's patriarchy is false. Patriarchy is an ideology. It created empire. It created the form of capitalism that most of us live in order to keep itself going, in order to maintain male supremacy. And all of the archaeology that Maria found is in museums in Romania and Bulgaria and some of the other countries in Eastern Europe. And for a long time, they were stuck behind the wall. They were in the Soviet Union. Nobody could see them, right? So we only had her books to tell us. Well, now you can go to those museums and you can look at all of those objects. And you can see the story that she told. I wish some really rich women would put
Speaking.
together a tour of all of that archaeology and that story. Like, you remember when Tutankhamun's grave went around the world? I don't know if you're old enough to remember this. In the 1970s, Tutankhamun's tomb went on a world tour so that everybody could see the richness
Okay.
and the complexity
Mm.
of ancient Egypt, right? And it was life-changing to see that as a child, right? To see a culture that old,
Okay.
that was that complex. We could do that for women's culture. We could do that for the matriarchy.
Yeah. We need to get a good YouTube out there.
Yeah, we do. I end up talking about these things. So yeah. Yeah, we need to get a really good YouTube out there. There's a lot of good stuff on Maria's work. She told a different story about the birth of patriarchy.
I was just thinking about this person. I'm not entirely sure how to say his name. Oh, sorry. So how he decided that Maria had like really bad ideas and that nobody should hear about them and she should not be allowed to act on them.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, like when Hitler was getting all these ideas that, there's a superior race and he should kill everyone else, whether nobody was around to tell him that he was having stupid ideas and silencing him. Like, where was the sensible person in the room at that time?
The interesting thing about patriarchy is that it does not really punish sociopaths, right? It sort of encourages people with grand ideas of grandeur and the idea that they're the best, right? So, yeah. Hitler made more sense to people than Maria Gimbutas did, apparently.
No, I mean the timelines are like not that far apart, like not in different centuries or anything. It was like
no. Yeah, she's starting her work in the 1960s. Yeah. You have to laugh about it because otherwise you have to set everything on fire, So I'm here for
I know,
having
that's so true.
I'm here for having a laugh for the time being.
If you just stop for a second and like really think about it, it'll make you cry. Like if you really stop and think about everything that's happening and how it's so ridiculous and how it's so difficult. And most of the women supporting the patriarchy in the sense that from the outside it might look like these women are not trying to do anything to change the situations they are in their patriarchal relationships or structures or systems or organizations or whatever, but nobody talks about how terrifying it is not knowing whether anything they do will make any difference or whether it will make everything more difficult for them in the future. And it just stops people from saying things and stops people from taking action in that way. I feel like we should work on talking to women and telling them, there is life beyond this. If you do this, you're not going to be abandoned. You're not going to lose everything. You're probably going to gain a lot more than you have right now. And that's something that a lot of women don't know and
Yeah.
don't believe and can't see.
Yeah.
So, showing that, trying to make that a reality, like showing maybe even in a small, if there was one matriarchal society, like in the world somewhere where women can see, okay, they did this and it worked. Maybe we'll see changes happening more often and more abundantly.
I think so. And there are little matriarchies still in the world, right? Some of them are very old, and some of them are new. There's and take a little side trip here for a second. There's an organization called the Gaia Education Matricultural School. Its founder is in Italy, and they do an eco-village education program that is based in matriarchal principles. So it's a matriarchal education in building your new world or your project that you want to work on, taking into consideration the people and the needs involved, the environment, how you're going to make your economy not so damaging or not damaging at all, make it regenerative, and centering women and their children, right? Because that's how we get new generations. And they're connected to a global network of eco-villages. And they're doing an education program in Colombia in a matriarchal village that was founded 30 years ago by a lawyer who was working with women in Colombia who had been battered or raped by their husbands. And these women left and founded their own village and have developed its economy and govern it. And only now, 30 years later, are there any men beginning to join the governing council. But those men were all raised in the village by these women according to these principles. And the rule there is, I think, as it was in the old matriarchies, that if you harm a woman, you have to leave. You have to get the hell out. There's a world out there for you, right? It will take you with your violence, but you can't stay here.
Yeah.
So there are examples. That's just one.
Okay.
There are examples of this. The thing is, nobody knows, right? Not enough women know that there is already a philosophy, already a culture, already a sisterhood that can hold you if you decide to change these things in your life, right? And I think a lot more women could be a lot braver if they know that. I think you're right. But then we have to be ready in our communities to receive these women who have no history, right, with matriarchy, possibly no feminism. Not their fault, but it's still a marginalized knowledge, right? And who may be very traumatized. And so there's a great deal that we need to be able to hold for them in order for them to come here, right? And feel safe and trusted. Yeah.
Yeah, plus you said that the women might not have knowledge of matriarchies or feminism, but they don't even know that they need help, and they don't even know that what they're in is a patriarchy. They don't know any of that.
Yeah.
I guess that even though the knowledge is spreading to us, like through our algorithms and everything, because we're already in this space, it's very rare that it would reach someone who's not even slightly curious or in any way trying to get into that space. So I'm thinking, how do we reach people who are not at all connected to any sort of feminism or any sort of matriarchy, rather than people who hear about it and know about it and are trying to reach us? And plus, we know that patriarchy uses feminism, the term itself, as a weapon sometimes, and it really takes away from the power and the truth of feminism.
I mean, I feel a little hopeless about that because patriarchy is using male dominance, very rich men, very rich particular men, we know their faces now, are using these logarithms to dice people up, right? To separate people in their hearts and also in their mind. Where patriarchy before, men's systems before, used the home, the city, the nation, the race, eventually, right? The cultural difference to separate women from each other. Now they can divide what we even know. And so I think part of our collective work needs to be way more public. Right? That's like another element that could be developed by some women, is to be more physically in the world somehow. In that
I think it
building.
is important because personally also, till I joined Matriarchy Times, feminism was an alien term to me, and that's 30 plus years. of
Yeah.
not knowing what feminism was, and the only idea I had of feminism was that it was not good, like it was
Right.
like it was completely crazy, fantastic idea, and it was basically known to me as an insult if someone called you feminist.
Mm,
Like
mm,
they were depicted in the most ridiculous ways, and so learning the truth actually helped me a lot in the way that I know there's something different out there, but like I said, it's getting there is scary and doesn't
mm,
look realistic
mm.
in most of the time. So I'm sure that like me, there's so many out there who are in the same position.
Yeah. I think it's important to know that you don't have to go all at once. You don't have to declare yourself a rebel, like at the beginning. You can learn. You can connect with people first. You can find something like Matriarchy Times or Medusa Rising or my friend's thing, Women Create, which focuses on canceled women artists, right? Um, you can find the thing that resonates with you most and move slowly into that, right? So that you gain that courage. Um, because there's a period, I'm sure that you went through this. There's a period of time where we almost have to just stop and grieve, you know, um, how we've been denied this knowledge, uh, how we've been alienated from ourselves as women by
Mm.
the cultural constructs, right, that patriarchy has created to wrap around us. And peeling them off feels like peeling off yourself. You can't do that just, Thursday afternoon. We all have to have time to do that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
especially in researching like Maria's work and other scholars about the prehistoric world, or the matriarchal studies group in Germany, and the books that they've published, that Gertner Abendroth has written. It just makes me incredibly sad often to go back and encounter these worlds and these facts, because they have obviously been deliberately put to the side. And some of the newer forms of feminism do the same thing. They don't want to have anything to do with that knowledge. Those women were essentialists. They were racist. They were colonialists. They didn't really believe in the goodness of non-white people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of that. Now, that's not true. That's true of a few women, right? But that's not true of the whole school of thought. And it keeps us separated from so much depth and ground and sense of self. It's sometimes hard to go back to think about it again, because you have to re-encounter a little bit of that sadness and that grief. But then I start looking at all the cool symbols and the beautiful villages and the worlds women are building now, and I'm like, fuck it, we're fine, it's great, let's go. Like we'll be okay. Yeah.
Speaking of symbols, you chose Medusa as your symbol. Why and what does she mean to you?
She's complicated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's complicated. A lot of women today identify with her because she's sort of the righteous, avenging victim in Greek mythology, right?
Yeah.
She's a priestess. She's raped by Poseidon. Athena's angry at her. She's betrayed by her community. She's turned into a gorgon with these snakes and this ugly face and this terrifying gaze, right? And this is her punishment. And her punishment makes her such a monster that no one can ever go near her. She must be alone forever, because anyone who sees her will be turned to stone, right? So her punishment for being a victim of a god is that she must be completely isolated from humanity, right? And this This follows, I think, a lot of the trauma and pain most women encounter when they've been violated, is that the community doesn't believe them. The community wants to put them at a distance a little bit, right? They won't acknowledge the pain. Yeah. In the Greek myths, she's not that. Not only does that happen to her, but then Athena helps Perseus, who's just an asshole, run around through some Greek myths and eventually cut her head off. He really is just kind of a jerk, and cut her head off in order to bring it to Athena, in order to stop the Kraken, blah, 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 save his girlfriend who is chained to a rock. And then Athena claims Medusa's head back for herself. Talk about the appropriation of one woman's power by another, right? To wear on her shield. Because even dead, Medusa's gaze is deadly, right? So that's part of it, is that she's kind of the ultimate avenging victim. But she's older than those stories, right? Again, this is a story of a woman, a goddess, a power being disempowered, right? There are older stories of the Gorgons where there are 3 sister Gorgons. One of them is Medusa. And somehow, of these 3 sisters, Medusa is the only mortal. The other 2 are immortal earth spirits. And that also makes it possible for Perseus to kill her. That's also one of the men's stories. But if you go to the island of Corfu, in the Greek archipelago, I recently learned this. I didn't know it before. I learned this in May. So I was extra happy to draw on Medusa's energy for this project. One of the oldest Greek temples anywhere in the Greek world is on the island of Corfu. It is a temple to the goddess Diana, right? Goddess of the moon, but also one of the ladies of the beasts. She's one of the protectors of the forest and all of the wild animals. And Lady of the Beasts is a very old name for many incarnations of the goddess. We find her not only on Corfu, but on Crete. Crete was one of the longest existing goddess and woman honoring cultures in the world. It probably lasted for 4,000 or 5,000 years. That's a really common name anyway. And many goddesses are connected with various animals, right? So on the pediment, over the doorway to this temple where you go in to worship Diana, is a Medusa, is a Gorgon. One of the oldest temples in Greece. It's older than the stories about her being raped. Yeah. And she's on it. You have to look this up. The pediment of the temple to Diana on the island of Corfu. She's this big athletic figure. She's physically very strong. Like her muscles are defined and emphasized. And she's in a kind of warrior.
Wonder Woman.
Yeah, no way. Seriously. You know, she's got her snakes for her hair. There's a snake necklace. These 2 snakes are holding her toga together as a belt. I think there might even be snakes on her sandals. I don't remember exactly. But she's in this kind of rawr pose, you know, big open mouth. Like this, right? She's a test. She's testing you. Are you worthy to come into this temple? And on either side of her are her 2 sons. Pegasus, right, who's in the Greek stories is born from her blood when she's killed. And her other son, Chrysaor, who is sometimes a golden boar with wings. He also flies like Pegasus. Or he's also figured as a giant man, right? And then on either side of them, sort of protecting and flanking her, like with so many goddess figures, are these 2 big mythical cats. They look like leopards more than anything else. They have spots. So she has all of the sort of trappings of a goddess herself on this mantle to another goddess. A goddess of the earth, a goddess of the forest, a goddess of wild animals, the goddess who never gets married, the goddess who tells all the boys they need to stay the fuck away. Right? One guy, one time, tries to come over and watch her rites with her priestesses, and she sets his own dogs on him to kill him. for spying on them, for
Yeah.
interrupting their
Poetic
private woman,
justice.
right? For interrupting their private woman space where they're working on their own woman culture. This dude comes peeking over the bushes and she's like, no, sir, and sets his own hunting hounds to kill him, right? The guardian of that goddess on the oldest known Greek temple is Medusa, right?
Mhm.
With teeth and tongue and these big scary eyes. She's obviously in a state of big power, right? I like her. I like that goddess. She might be really old. She might be a very old
I
snake
can
goddess.
see the appeal.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
She might be a very old goddess of that region. There's another scholar, Patricia, gonna mess up her last name. Monahan, who theorizes that she might have been a sun god. And that might be why she's twinned with the moon goddess Diana. We don't know, because the writing
Maybe.
system of these people, the writing system that these goddess civilizations in Europe had has been erased. We don't have a Rosetta Stone for it, right? We couldn't read cuneiform until we found the Rosetta Stone that had a language on it that we knew. And then we could start translating, but we don't have a Rosetta Stone for that culture. So they have symbols. We just can't quite know for sure what they mean because we can't translate. But she might be really old. So that's part of the reason I got excited about having her as part of our symbol, but also
I
the
hope
idea of her life.
nobody. I hope nobody in the patriarchy tries to decipher those symbols because they'll just make a nice story the way that they did to the Bible.
They shouldn't.
They'll make it so convenient for them.
No, they definitely should not. They should not. They're really beautiful. It's a really beautiful symbol system. But nobody has any clue what they really mean for sure. Good guesses. We have good guesses, but
Yeah.
good guesses were good enough for
And
history
also,
for a long time when it was men. So
yeah. And also, speaking of being afraid of messing up surnames, I didn't read your surname out because I'm not exactly sure how to say it either.
oh, thanks. I am immune to people making mistakes with my name, but this is actually not my real name. Esmee
Okay.
Strijkalt. It is Strijkalt. It's Irish. And it's the
Okay.
it's the Irish word for struggle. So Esmee is from the French, right? And it means precious or esteemed or whatever, valued. And the last name is struggle. So it means the dear or the precious struggle.
Precious struggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what is trouble in Irish?
Shit, I have no idea. I don't know enough Irish to know that. I should, but I don't. I could look it up real quick and find out. We can learn that right now if we want to. Yeah. So anyway, Esmee Strijkalt means the precious struggle. I adopted this name when I started working with the radical notion. So I kept it as I moved into this project. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a precious struggle.
It is, isn't it? Like we deserve to be held in our culture and honored in our history in the deepest possible way. And that's one of the things I want to help bring into the world through this project. So yeah.
So do you see movements like yours and ours working together, feminist coalitions? Do you think we have a shot at shaping the future?
Yes. Yeah, I want to. I have both incredible optimism and incredible pessimism about the future. It's really a hard place to sit. I'm very scared that our industrial world has already upset the balance too much, and it's just downhill from here into, doom. But giving into that means that I have to just drink myself to death, and I don't feel like drinking myself to death. So, Instead, I'm going to think that we can. And I don't know exactly what that's going to end up looking like, right? Because it's the future and it's going to generate its own conditions and influences that we will all have to respond to as we go, right? What I want to work on, though, the goal I want to set out there, is the goal that the radical feminists had in the women's liberation movement in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, which was a world where women are free.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only world in which women can be free must be matriarchal, because men are really bad at learning how to come along with this project. You know, they just don't want to be less centered and less important and less worshipped or served, right, than they are. And I want to try to convince them that for probably 40 or 50 or 100,000 years even, lots of men lived beside women in matriarchal cultures, and they were happy. They were okay. And we know that because they were always bigger and stronger than women, and they did not overthrow the women for tens of millennia. Probably. I'm going to say, I'll just put the probably there. So yeah, I think us finding creative ways for us to work together, for other feminists to build coalition together, is the only way we're going to get enough energy collected, right? Like our separations in patriarchy is also a dispersal of our energy, right? So we have to come together more in order to collect enough energy to begin to make these deep changes. What exactly that becomes, we don't get to say from this end, right? But that's the adventure of it. Patriarchy's fucking boring. It does the same thing over and over and over again, right? You know, build up, power, collapse, build up, power, collapse, hurt people, collapse. You know, it doesn't do anything new. It makes cool toys. It makes cool tech. But women were making cool tech, you know, way back in the ancient times. There's no reason we wouldn't have eventually come up with
meant to credit for.
Yes, exactly. Over and over again. Yeah. Women invented computer code, right? We built the first
internet.
Yeah. We built the very first computers, but never mind.
Yeah.
So I am hoping that more and more women who are interested in making a future matriarchy, even a Gailanic matriarchy in the way that you guys envision, come together to gather that energy and start creating those projects and help each other internationally more. And if there are some places about, I don't know, a particular philosophy or a particular method or a particular local adaptation to struggling against the patriarchy where you are, because it's not exactly the same everywhere, right? That we don't argue with each other about it and we don't get in each other's way, right? Build where there's a confluence and protect, leave alone where there isn't one, you know? Because we all know how to deal in our own countries. We all know what we're doing here, but it's not going to be exactly the same at exactly the same time, you know? Yeah.
I mean, if we can't work together, if we're having conflicts and we all want to do things our way and we think our way is the right way, then there won't be any difference between us and the patriarchy.
Correct.
So the primary difference has to be that we work together.
Yeah, it does. And that we, you know, difference in patriarchy is danger. But difference for us is opportunity, right? It's power. Because when different things come together, they create. That's why there's a Y chromosome. If you have sexual difference, you can adapt to change faster. Matriarchy always knew that, right? So differences in our organizations, local differences in our needs or goals, all that needs to be respected and cared for, right? and talked about in a way that's exploratory. I think about it like patriarchy doesn't like to play. It doesn't like to put its different toys together and figure out what new thing it can make, right? But I think
Yeah.
matriarchy does. I think matriarchy does have a great sense of play and invention and exploration. And you have to have different stuff for that to happen. Like, that's how difference works. It's generative, right?
Yeah.
Unless you try to squish it. So that's the basic theory. That's the basic political theory of Medusa Rising. Let 1,000 matriarchies flourish. Let us all help each other get the hell out of here, because these people are killing us, literally.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Okay, Esmee, that was a very enlightening conversation, and I think that we got to a point where we can all agree that there is history that has been covered up, and history that we need to actually put some effort into looking into in order to kind of make sense of what happened.
Yeah.
And why it should be undone.
Yes, I think so. I think we should find as many ways to do that as we possibly can. Yeah.
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 So everybody, please check out medusarising.org, and you will see Esmee's amazing work with her team of 2 right now, but they're growing. And and we will have more of her in the future as well, because she's currently working with us and collaborating with us as well. So thank you so much, Esmee. Is there any last sentiment that you would like to give our audience for today?
Well, I would just like to thank you for reaching out and for saying hello, and for starting this exploration together. I think it's going to be pretty amazing as it deepens. A last sentiment. Cling to your courage.
Get on feminist algorithms.
Yes, more. Yeah, that's one of the things I like to say at the bottoms of all of our emails, right? Make the algorithm feminist, share more feminist work, hashtag more feminist stuff, so that it just can't be ignored by the machine, because the machine likes boys and it doesn't like us. Yeah. That's a great place to stop, right? Make the algorithm feminist. It's magic. It's literally magic. Yeah. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, Esmee, thank you. And I hope I'll see you again soon.
Yeah, me too. This has been really wonderful. Thank you, Farah, for your time and the care that you brought to this conversation. Thank you so much.
And thank you, everybody who watched. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Links to everything that was mentioned during the podcast will be in the description.